I've hiked thousands of miles across this country. I've done solo trips through deserts, crossed mountain passes at altitude, and camped alone in places most people have never heard of. I thought I had seen everything the wilderness had to offer. I was wrong. What I'm about to share with you are 5 real encounters that happened to real people on real trails in the United States. Some of them still haven't fully recovered. After you hear what happened, you'll understand why. My name is Marcus. I'm 34 years old and I've been hiking since my early 20s. I'm not reckless about it either. I take it seriously. I know what gear to bring, I know how to read terrain, and I know when to turn back. I grew up in Charlotte, and Pisgah National Forest was basically my backyard. I knew it the way some people know their neighborhood streets. The trip I'm going to tell you about happened about 2 years ago. I was going through a divorce at the time. Not a messy one, just a slow, heartbreaking unraveling of something I thought was going to last my whole life. I needed to be alone, and I needed to be outside. Those are the 2 things that have always cleared my head. I picked an off-trail section of Pisgah I'd explored maybe once before, years earlier. I wanted solitude. I had no idea what I was walking into. I'd been on the trail for maybe 2 hours when the first strange thing happened. I had stopped to rest on a fallen log and drink some water. I wear a GPS watch, a good one, the kind serious hikers use. When I stood back up and glanced at my wrist, the watch had been reset. The route data was gone. The elapsed time was gone. The whole thing had been wiped back to factory settings. I stood there staring at it for a long moment, trying to think of any logical explanation. Could I have accidentally reset it? I've owned that watch for 3 years. I've never accidentally reset it once. I shook it off. Stuff malfunctions. I still had my phone and a downloaded map, so I wasn't worried about navigation. I kept moving. The forest was gorgeous that time of year, mid-October, the leaves just starting to turn. I remember thinking how peaceful it was. That peace didn't last. About 40 minutes later, I started noticing something on the trail ahead of me. Boot prints. Now, boot prints on a trail aren't unusual, obviously, but these were unusual for one reason. They were only in front of me, not behind, not alongside, ahead of me. And they were fresh. The mud was still wet and displaced. Whoever made them hadn't made them hours ago. They'd made them minutes ago. The problem with that is that I hadn't seen a single person all morning, not one. I'd passed nobody on the way in, and nobody had passed me. I kept walking, telling myself there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. Someone had come from the other direction. Someone had a different entry point. I was overthinking it because I'd been alone with my thoughts all morning and my brain was looking for something to latch onto. That's what I told myself. I was wrong to dismiss it. A few minutes after that, I saw the first one. Hanging from a low branch right at eye level, a small doll, handmade, fashioned out of sticks and what looked like dried grass, bound together with dark twine. I stopped walking completely. I'm not a superstitious person, I don't believe in omens or any of that, but something about seeing that thing hanging there in the middle of an otherwise empty forest made my stomach drop in a way I can't fully explain. It looked fresh. The grass wasn't dried out, it hadn't been there long. I looked ahead. There was another one, 20 feet further down the trail, then another after that. I counted 6 of them in total, each one hanging at exactly the same height, each one pointing deeper into the forest like a sick invitation. I stood completely still and listened. Nothing. No birds, no wind, just the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. I turned around. I didn't run, but I walked fast. I wasn't going to follow a trail of handmade dolls into the woods alone. I'm not that person. I'd covered maybe a quarter mile back toward my car when I heard movement in the tree line to my left. Not close, maybe 30 yards, but deliberate, like someone trying to keep pace with me without being seen. Every time I slowed, it slowed. Every time I sped up, it sped up. I broke into a jog. The movement in the trees matched me. I started running, the acceleration mockened. I was running full speed now, heart slamming in my chest, and I could hear crashing through brush somewhere behind me and to the side of me. I didn't look back. I've made a lot of good decisions in my life, and that was one of them. I came out of the tree line and hit the access road at full sprint. When I finally reached my truck, I fumbled with my keys for what felt like an eternity before getting the door open. I looked in the rearview mirror as I drove away, and at the edge of the tree line, standing completely still, were two figures, not moving, not giving chase, just standing there watching me leave. I couldn't make out any detail from that distance, just two dark shapes at the forest edge. I reported it to a ranger station on the way out. The ranger I spoke to didn't look surprised. He told me that the section of forest I'd been in had reports going back several years of a small, isolated group that considered that land theirs, not legally, just in their minds. He said they'd had multiple reports of hikers being intimidated or followed, but that no one had been physically harmed. He said the word "yet" without saying it. You could just hear it hanging there. I still hike. I love it too much to stop. But I don't go off trail alone anymore, and I never go back to that section of Pisgah. Whatever those people believe about that land, I'm happy to let them have it. My husband Ray and I aren't what you'd call serious hikers. We're more like enthusiastic amateurs. We live in Portland, and we try to get out into the wilderness whenever we can manage it. Usually, that means a weekend trip every couple of months. Nothing technical, nothing death-defying, just the two of us and nature. The trip I'm going to tell you about was for our 20th wedding anniversary. Ray's brother Daniel and his girlfriend Petra came with us, 4 of us total. We'd rented a small cabin near the Rogue River and planned to spend 3 days exploring some of the trails in the national forest nearby. It was honestly one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, that first morning especially. Clear sky, cool air, everything green and alive. On our second day, we decided to explore a trail that wasn't in the guidebook. Ray had found it on a satellite map. It looked like it followed a creek up into a higher elevation and came back around through some old-growth trees. We figured it would take 3 or 4 hours. We packed lunch. We were in good spirits. About 90 minutes in, we left the main path and started following the creek uphill. That's when Daniel spotted it. Set back from the creek, half hidden by a rock formation, was a cave entrance. Not a dramatic yawning cavern, just a low, wide opening in the rock face, maybe 5 feet tall. What caught our attention wasn't the cave itself, it was what was outside it. There were crates, wooden crates stacked neatly against the rock. Tarps laid over something larger and tied down with rope, and what looked like a folding table with supplies on it. Water containers, rope, folded fabric. We stood there for a moment trying to figure out what we were looking at. A hunter's cache, maybe? A survival prepper situation? Ray walked closer to look, and I followed. The crates had padlocks on them, heavy ones. Not the kind of padlock you use on a storage unit, the kind of padlock you use when you really need something to stay locked. Inside the cave opening, we could see that someone had been living there. Blankets, a lantern, cans of food, and along one wall, a row of zip ties hanging from a horizontal rope like they were drying laundry. The zip ties were the thing that changed the feeling of the whole situation. I've tried to think of an innocent explanation for a row of zip ties hanging in a remote cave, and I cannot come up with one. I took out my phone and started photographing everything. Ray grabbed my arm and told me to stop, that we needed to leave. He was right. I knew he was right. I took 2 more photos anyway. We were starting to back away when we heard footsteps on the trail above us. Not casual footsteps, fast ones, coming downhill toward us. Ray grabbed my hand, and the 4 of us pressed ourselves into the rocks behind the cave entrance. A man came down into the clearing. He was carrying something, a large duffel bag over one shoulder, and was pulling something behind him. A rope, and on the end of that rope was a young woman. She was walking, but barely. Her head was down. She didn't look up. I cannot tell you what it felt like to watch that and not be able to do anything. There were 4 of us and 1 of him, but he was large and we had no idea what he was carrying in that duffel bag or whether he was armed. Ray was squeezing my hand so hard it hurt. Petra had her hand over her mouth. We didn't breathe. He went into the cave. We ran. Daniel had hurt his ankle on the creek crossing and couldn't run properly, so Ray and I each took a side and we basically dragged him back down the trail as fast as we could. About 10 minutes later, we heard movement above us on the slope. He'd come back out and seen something, a footprint, a disturbed plant, I have no idea, but he was coming after us. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. We couldn't go fast enough because of Daniel's ankle, and I kept looking back, expecting to see that man appear on the trail behind us. We came around a bend and I nearly cried when I saw a family, 2 parents and 3 kids with day packs, coming toward us on the trail. We must have looked insane. I grabbed the father by the arm and told him to turn around, that there was a dangerous person on the trail ahead. He looked at me like I was unhinged. Maybe I was. But the sound of pursuit behind us stopped the moment other people were present. We made it back to the trailhead and called 911 from the parking lot. I gave them every photo I had taken. The Forest Service and FBI were both involved within 24 hours. They asked us to stay in the area for a day, which we did. We didn't sleep that night. About 4 months later, I got a call from an FBI field agent who had been assigned to the case. She told me that the site had been connected to a human trafficking operation that had been under investigation for over a year. 1 arrest had been made. She thanked me for the photographs and told me they had been useful. She didn't tell me anything else, and I didn't ask. Some information you're better off not having. Ray and I still talk about it. Not often, but it comes up. The wilderness is supposed to be one of the safest places you can be, away from cities, away from crowds, away from everything that makes the world feel dangerous. What I learned that day is that for some people, that remoteness is exactly the point. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I've been around hunting my whole life. My dad hunted, my uncle hunted. I went with them plenty of times as a kid. I know the difference between someone in the woods with a rifle and someone in the woods with a rifle who means you harm. At least I thought I did. I was 22. It was fall break during my junior year of college, and 2 of my friends, Derek and Simone, wanted to do an overnight camping trip. I suggested Allegheny National Forest because I'd been there before, and it's genuinely one of the most beautiful places in Pennsylvania. We're talking old-growth forest, ridgelines that go on forever, the kind of place that makes you feel like you're 100 years back in time. We hiked in about 4 miles to a flat clearing near a creek and set up camp. We had dinner, built a fire, and were having a genuinely great time. Around 9 o'clock, we heard a rifle shot, single shot, maybe a quarter mile away. We didn't think much of it. Deer season had started and hunters are out there. That's just the reality of camping in a national forest in Pennsylvania in October. We turned in around 10:30. I was almost asleep when Simone tapped me on the shoulder. She was pointing at the tent wall. There was a light outside. Not a fixed light. It was moving. A flashlight beam slowly sweeping back and forth across the outside of our tent. I called out, "Hello!" Nothing. I said it louder. Still nothing. The light moved once more across the tent, and then it was gone. Derek unzipped the tent and looked out. Nobody there. He walked the perimeter of the camp. Nobody. We sat up for another hour before deciding it must have been a hunter checking out the camp out of curiosity. We went back to sleep. What I woke up to in the morning changed the whole story. Simone was standing outside the tent when I unzipped it. She wasn't saying anything, just staring at the trees ringing our campsite. I followed her gaze, and my stomach turned. Every single tree that surrounded our camp, and I counted later, there were 11 of them, had fresh carvings in the bark. All of the carvings faced inward, toward us, toward the tent, like eyes. One of the trees closest to the tent had a single word carved into it in large blocky letters: "Leave." That was it. No explanation, no threat beyond the word itself, just "Leave," carved into a tree over our sleeping heads while someone stood 6 feet away from us in the dark. Then Derek found the cooler. It had been opened. The food we'd packed was gone. Not taken, stacked. stacked in a neat pile on a flat rock about 10 feet from the cooler, organized by size. Every item, our peanut butter sandwiches, our fruit, our snack bars, all of it arranged with a kind of deliberate precision that was somehow more disturbing than if it had just been scattered on the ground. It was a demonstration. He could have taken our food. He could have done far worse. He wanted us to know that. We packed up in about 15 minutes. I've never broken camp so fast in my life. We didn't talk much. We just moved. We had 4 miles between us and the trailhead, and all 3 of us knew we needed to cover those 4 miles as quickly and quietly as possible. We were about 1.5 miles out when it happened. The trail bent around a large oak, and we came around that bend and stopped dead. A man was standing on the trail, right in the middle of it, 10 feet ahead of us, full camouflage, head to toe, a rifle hanging at his side. He wasn't pointing it at us. He was just standing there, looking at us. I said, "Good morning." He didn't respond. I said we were heading out. He didn't respond to that either. He just watched us with this completely neutral expression, not aggressive, not friendly, just flat. I made the decision that we were going to walk around him, and I started moving, angling slightly off the trail to give him a wide berth. Derek and Simone followed. The man turned to watch us as we passed. When we were about 20 feet past him, I looked back. He had stepped back onto the trail and was following us. He stayed about 50 yards back the entire time. For a full mile, he followed us, maintaining that exact distance, not closing the gap, not falling back, just there. That 50 yards felt like the most precise and intentional thing I've ever experienced, like he'd decided exactly how close he wanted to be and not a step closer or farther. When we hit the main road, he stopped at the tree line. He didn't come out of the forest. He just stood there at the edge and watched us walk to the car. I threw our gear in the trunk and we left. When I looked back from the road, he was still there. We filed a report at the ranger station. The ranger said they'd had complaints about a man matching that description before, an aggressive local who believed he had some kind of claim to a section of that forest. He'd intimidated campers, destroyed property, and had a history of confrontations. He'd been reported multiple times. He'd never been charged with anything. The ranger said there wasn't much they could do if nobody got physically hurt. That's the part I still think about. Not the carvings, not the food, not even him standing on that trail waiting for us. It's the fact that he had done this before. Whatever was in those woods the night he circled our camp, that patience, that precision, that complete absence of fear, he'd practiced it on other people, in other campsites. And as far as I know, he's still out there.
I want to start by saying I'm not someone who scares easily. My name is Brittany, and I've been a solo hiker for 6 years. I run a hiking blog, I carry grid gear, and I've done remote solo trips in 5 different states. I know the risks that come with hiking alone as a woman. I've thought about them, prepared for them, and accepted them as part of the lifestyle. Nothing in 6 years of solo hiking prepared me for what happened in Shoshone. I drove up from Denver on a Thursday morning, 3 days, 2 nights, solo. The plan was to follow a loop trail that took me through a high alpine meadow and back down through timber country. I'd done the research. I had my Bayer canister, my satellite communicator, my emergency beacon. I signed the trail register at the trailhead. I was prepared. I made camp the first evening at a flat spot near a creek about 7 miles in. It was stunning. The kind of place that makes everything else in your life feel very far away and very small. I woke up at 2 in the morning to a sound that I still can't unhear. My tent zipper was moving, not all at once, slowly, one tooth at a time, the way you'd pull a zipper if you were trying very hard not to make noise. I lay completely still inside my sleeping bag, not breathing. The zipper stopped about a third of the way up. A pause. Then it reversed, pulling back down just as slowly. And then silence. I didn't sleep again that night. When the sky finally started to lighten, I got up and looked outside. Nothing. Nobody. But when I walked the perimeter of my campsite, I found boot prints in the soft soil. They made a wide circle around my tent, not approaching it, not retreating,
just a slow, deliberate orbit. Someone had walked around my tent in a circle in the middle of the night and then left. I told myself it was a curious hiker passing through who saw my tent and checked it out. I told myself a lot of things that morning. I broke camp anyway and moved. I hiked 2 miles further up the loop to a different site, more exposed, closer to the trail. I told myself the open ground would make me feel better. I set up my tent, cooked dinner, and watched the sun go down. And then I found it. I'd left my water bottle on a flat rock outside while I was setting up the tent. When I came back to get it, the bottle was in the same place, but underneath it, tucked beneath the base, was a small folded piece of paper. 2 words written in pencil in neat block letters. Better spot. That was it. Better spot. Someone had been to my new campsite before I arrived. Someone had known where I was going before I got there. I have never packed a tent so fast. I didn't bother to roll it properly. I just stuffed it into my pack and started moving. It was nearly dark, and I was 2 miles from where I'd been the night before, and 4 miles from a road, and I had no idea where this person was. I turned on my headlamp and I walked. I didn't run, because running in unfamiliar terrain in the dark is how you break an ankle, and break an ankle out there alone, and you die. So I walked, fast as I could. About a mile from the trailhead, I came around a switchback, and a man was sitting on a rock beside the trail. Just sitting there in the darkness. He had a headlamp, but it was off. He was just sitting there in the darkness, waiting. When my light hit him, he looked up at me and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a smile like he'd been expecting me, like he knew I'd be coming down that trail at exactly that moment. He said, "Nice night for a hike." I said nothing. I kept walking. He watched me pass without moving. I could feel his eyes on my back for the entire last mile to the trailhead. I reached my car, locked the doors, and sat in the parking lot shaking for 10 minutes before I could drive. There was one other vehicle in the lot, an older truck with Wyoming plates. No one in it. I reported everything the next morning. The zipper, the boot prints, the note, the man on the trail. The ranger I spoke to was a woman, and when I described what had happened, her expression changed in a way that told me she'd heard this before. She said there had been previous incidents in that corridor, a lone male targeting female solo hikers specifically. She said they'd had reports going back 18 months. No arrest, no name, no photo. I still hike solo. I refuse to give that up. But I carry a satellite communicator on every trip now, and I check in every 6 hours without fail. What haunts me about that night isn't the zipper or the boot prints or even the man on the trail. It's the note, "Better spot," written in neat, careful letters. The care in it, like he was being helpful, like he wanted me to know he'd been watching long enough to know where I was going before I got there. By the time this happened, I was 600 miles into my Appalachian Trail through hike. 600 miles changes you. You're not the same person who stepped off a shuttle in Georgia with a brand new pack and soft feet. You're leaner, tougher, more attuned to your surroundings. You develop a kind of instinct for the trail and the people on it. Through hikers have a culture, a language. You recognize your own. My name is James, and I've been hiking the AT for over 2 decades. I know the trail the way some people know their own face in the mirror. What happened near the Smokies is something I never saw coming. I pulled into a 3-sided trail shelter around 4 in the afternoon. I was tired, and my knees were talking to me, which happens more now that I'm in my mid-40s. There were already 2 other people at the shelter. A young woman, trail name Sparrow, maybe 25, who was cooking dinner and seemed friendly enough. And a man, no trail name offered, no small talk. He was sitting at the far end of the shelter with his pack between his legs, just watching the tree line. That's not unusual in itself.
Some hikers are introverts, some are just tired. But something about him was off in a way I couldn't immediately name. Through hiker culture is built on openness. You share your name, your trail name, where you started, where you're going. It's almost a ritual. Sparrow and I went through it naturally. The man didn't engage. When I asked where he'd started, he looked at me for a second and then looked back at the trees. Not rude exactly, just absent. Like social norms were something he was aware of, but had chosen to opt out of entirely. I woke up at midnight to the sound of someone moving around outside the shelter. That's not automatically alarming. People get up to use the bathroom, check their gear, whatever. But this movement wasn't brief. It went on for over an hour. A slow circuit around the shelter, back and forth. I lay still in my sleeping bag and watched the shelter opening. Once, just once, I saw his silhouette pass across it. He was just walking, in the dark, in circles. In the morning, I checked my pack before anything else. I'm meticulous about how I pack. Everything has a place, and I put things back in their place every single time, without exception. My emergency beacon lives in the top outer pocket of my pack, always. It was gone from that pocket. I found it at the very bottom of my main compartment, buried under my sleeping bag, my food bag, and my rain gear. It would have taken 2 or 3 minutes of deliberate unpacking and repacking to put it there. Someone had gone through my bag in the night and buried the one item I would use to call for help. I didn't say anything. I repacked quietly and started making coffee, watching the man across the shelter. He was awake and looking at me, and I had the very clear and very cold feeling that he knew I'd found it, that he'd wanted me to find it, that this was part of something. He left to get water from the creek about 20 minutes later, and the moment he was out of sight, Sparrow crossed the shelter and crouched beside me. She spoke quietly and quickly. She said he had been following her for 40 miles of trail, that she'd first noticed him 3 days back, always behind her, always appearing at the same shelters. She'd been sending messages ahead to the trail towns warning other hikers. She had 6 replies from people who'd had uncomfortable interactions with the same man in the same stretch of trail. She showed me her phone. I read enough to understand that we needed to leave immediately. We were packed and moving before he came back from the creek. We didn't hike. We moved at a pace that was just below running, eating up miles, not talking. About 3 miles out, we hit a road crossing, a 2-lane highway that cut through the forest. We stood at the edge of the road, and within 2 minutes, a pickup truck slowed and stopped. I told the driver we needed a ride to the next town. He looked at our faces and didn't ask a single question. He just said, "Get in." As we pulled away, I looked back through the rear window. He was standing at the tree line, pack on, watching us go. He didn't look angry or surprised or even disappointed. He just watched. That stillness, that patience, that's what I keep coming back to. I posted a detailed description on the main Thru Hikers forum that night. Photo of his pack, description of his clothing, the stretch of trail, the shelter. Within 48 hours, I had responses from 3 other hikers who'd encountered the same man in the same area over the previous 2 weeks. All solo hikers. All had felt followed or watched. Rangers in 2 counties were notified. As far as I know, he was never identified, never found. I finished my thru hike. I always finish what I start. But I want to be clear about what I learned that year and what I want you to take from this. The Appalachian Trail passes through 14 states and attracts millions of hikers every year. It is one of the greatest gifts this country has to offer. And it is largely unmonitored, deeply remote, and full of strangers. Most of those strangers are wonderful people. Most of them. The trail will teach you 100 beautiful things if you let it. Just don't forget that it runs through the wilderness, and the wilderness doesn't promise you safety. It never has.
5 different people, 5 different states, 5 different trails. And yet something connects all of these stories beyond the obvious. It's the feeling that the wilderness, that vast, indifferent space we like to think of as a retreat, was never really empty. It just made us feel that way. The forests and trails in this country are ancient and enormous, and most of what happens inside them never gets reported. The trails are real. The people are real. Whatever is out there in the places where the paths end and the maps go quiet, that's real too. Hike smart. Tell someone where you're going, and trust your instincts. They exist for a reason.